Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today is HK Styles here. Thank you for stopping right here on my space today. So I'll be quickly sharing with you all the detailed process on how to go about this beautiful gown you see right here on the screen. So let's just give a little analysis on this dress. I'm a lover of Basque waistline, and that is the number one thing that attracted me to this dress. So it also has gathers around the base or around the waistline area, as you can see right here. It is slightly curved on the neckline area coupled with a queen and neckline. It has two net long sleeves, so it's a bustier gown as well at the upper part. So if this sounds like something you're interested in learning how to do, please continue watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Without much ado, let's get started with today's tutorial. So right here I've assembled all the materials I'll be using in the creation of this beautiful gown. So the first I have with me here is a net, which is transparent and black in color. So I have about 1.5 yards of this net, which is more than enough for the two long sleeves which we have. Then the second I have is my crepe fabric, which is black in color. So altogether I made use of roughly 3 yards of fabric to recreate this beautiful gown you see right here. So I also have my pattern paper and my ruler as well. So I'm just going to get started by folding my pattern paper into two. So before I go ahead to do this, when I fold, I'll get the largest circumference on my body, which is my hip circumference of 43 inches. I'll divide it by 4 and measure out what I have on fold on my pattern paper. So if it's up to that, I'll also add extra 1.5 inches for my allowance. So when I measured this out, it wasn't up to my hip circumference divided by 4. I added in more inches, as you can see right here. So when I measured out the second time, it was perfectly okay. So at this point, I'm going to get started with drafting out our bodies. So at the top part of this paper, I'll leave about half of an inch. And I'll roll a straight line, which is going to be my shoulder line. As you can see, I'm labeling it right here. So under my shoulder line, I'll divide my shoulder of 14 inches into 2 and add extra half an inch there. And right there on my shoulder line, I mark 7.5 inches. From that 7.5 inches, I marked 8 inches down, which is a perfect armhole for any adult, so long as you're not on the bust size of 48 inches and above. So this other line I extended, I labeled it my chest line. So I'll be inputting my other body measurements by placing my tape from my shoulder line, and I'm going to get my bust points of 10 inches, my under bust of 13 inches, my half length of 16 inches. Then I'm going to count extra 8 inches, which will be for my hip line, and exactly on the length of this paper is where my hip line of 24 inches stopped. So after marking all these points, I'm going ahead to extend all these points I've made into a straight line, which I'll go ahead to label my bust point, my under bust, and then the last one is my half length before my hip line. So I'll not be labeling my hip line because that's actually where my paper stopped. So on this my armhole, I divided it into 2, which is 4. On that 4 inches, I came in by half of an inch. Then on this line, which is my chest line, I divided my bust circumference by 4. So I marked what I have right there on that line this way. So using this part of my curve rule, I'm going to connect this from my shoulder together with all these points till I get to my chest line. So I believe you understand what I've done so far. So on these lines now, I'm going to get my nipple to nipple point divided by 2. My nipple to nipple point is 7 inches, divided by 2 is 3.5 inches. So I marked it on these lines and connected it into a straight line. So at this point now, we have not worked on the neckline area. So you are going to determine how deep you want your neckline to be. For me, I want it to stop at exactly 6 inches. So from my shoulder, I mark 6 inches downward, as you can see right here. Now I'm extending this my dart up to this 6 inches. So at this point, from this 6 inches upward now will be my yoke. Okay, so I'm extending this dart line as well to the ends of my paper. I believe everything I'm doing right here is very clear to you all. So I'm going to come to my dart line now towards the center front of my pattern paper. I'm going to mark 3/4 of an inch away from my dart leg. I'll repeat the same thing at both sides. Remember, this is on my half length. Okay, so I'll connect these points now up to my under bust line, from my half length upward to my under bust line, as you can see I've done right here. So I get my curve rule and I'm going to make use of the curve part right now. So this is like us creating a bustier, which I have several tutorials on how to go about that, right? So from my half length, I'm going to extend my dart up to the full length of this my paper this way. So please just pay proper attention to the way I'm doing this for this other part of my paper. Okay, So this is what I have right now. I'm just going to come to that 6 inches line, which is our new neckline or our neck depth. So I'm going to mark half of an inch away from this my darts, just as you can see I'm doing right here. So I mark half of an inch away from there, and I'm also going to reconnect it into this my dart on my bust points at both sides. I believe you see what I'm doing right here. Okay, so having done this now, I'm just going to go ahead to replace my dart and also take my body measurement. So my waist circumference divided by 4 is 8 inches. I mark what I have right there on my half length. So I'm just simply going to go ahead and divide my hip circumference by 4. So whatever I have, I'm going to mark it right there from the folded part of my paper. So having gotten all these points now, I'm going to go ahead now to connect all these dots together. So you can see from my chest line I connected to my half length and then all the way into my hip line. So the next I'm going to go ahead and replace all my darts that I've taken right here so far. So on this my 6 inches neck depth, I measured out my dart intake, half of an inch at both sides. I got 1 inch, so I went ahead to replace it now on this same line. You can see at this point I replaced it. So having done this, I'll have to go ahead and reconnect my armhole. So this is actually how to go about this. I believe everything I've done right here is very clear to you all. So having replaced my dart for the upper part or for the neckline, I'll replace my waist dart. So 3/4 of an inch at both sides. I had 1.5 inches as my dart intake, so I'm going to replace it now at the size of this my paper. So if you have been following me right here on my channel, you know the way I normally replace my dart, okay, from the exact place and point it was taken initially. So when I mark this 1.5 at the sides here, I'm going to place my stretch ruler this way and connect it this way. Then for this other hip part, I'll use this part of my curve rule to connect it into my hip parts. So this is for me to actually have an accurate measurement when I'm sewing, okay, so that I don't have excessive by adding or replacing that to where that wasn't taken at all. Okay, so I'll move over to creating my neckline right now because we are yet to do that. So I'm going to mark 3 inches as my neck width, which I've always done right here on my channel. Then from my armhole, I'm going to mark 3 inches inward. See, you can see I'm marking it inside. Okay, so now I'm going to connect my neck depth, my neck width into these 3 inches I marked inside from my armhole. So I believe you see what I've done right here and it's not confusing at all. So I just marked my shoulder slope of half of an inch by going up by half inch from my shoulder line and slanted it into this other part of my shoulder. So I'm just going to label this part now my yoke. This part is my center front CF, and this other part I labeled SF is my side front. So having done this now, I'm going to slash this from the half length. Okay, so from my half length now, I'm going to slash this my paper so that I can get my basque or my curve in front of my gown. Okay, so after slashing it from the half length, I also cut out exactly the way it is at the sides. So please note that we are yet to add our sewing allowance. Okay, so what I'm trying to do right here is just to cover up this dart, because this dart is not needed on the lower part or on the back area of our gown. Okay, so you can see how I've gone ahead now to close this my that is not there for this part of the dress. Okay, so I'm just going to use my sellotape to tape this down so that it doesn't open up at all before I go ahead to create my curve for the basque effect.
There was once a day that I would pray for you. I'd go and misbehave just so you'd notice too. Sneaking looks up and down from across the room. And damn, what a hell of a view. I feel good, you look great.
So I'll be placing this other pattern paper I have one side so that we can focus on this particular one I have right here. Okay, so all I'm going to do is to measure out what I have all together on this part of my paper, and I'm going to divide it into 2. Okay, I'll divide it into 2 equal halves and mark the middle.
I can't wait, a first time, a first date. You're so fine, I'm so late. You sip wine.
So at that point there is my middle, and I'm going to connect it up to the ends of my paper. So I'll come from the base now and mark 3 inches upward from the base of this part of my paper, which is where I'll be creating my curve for the basque effect. So I mark 3 inches up and I'm using my stretch ruler to connect it into a straight line. So all I'm going to do is to get my curve rule, and I'm just going to place it properly, making sure that the top part of my curve rule is touching this 3 inches line, and also the middle of this my paper which I have right here. Okay, so I've connected for this other part, and I'm also going to create this curve for this other part. So just make sure that the way my lines are aligning is the same way you also align as well. So that is it for the lower part or the back area of this gown. So I'll just simply go ahead now to cut it out exactly the way I've marked on my paper. So I'm going to open this up so that I can close the other dart, because I just closed the dart for one side. So you can see this other part is not lapping properly. So I'm using my sellotape to tape this down, and this is what it looks like. So I'll keep this aside to finish up for the body part of this my gown. So I'm going to cut out the sides of this my gown. Please note that I'm yet to add any stitching allowance to this pattern I have right here with me. Okay, so after cutting out the sides, now I'm going to slash through from that 6 inches, which is my neck depth as well. So just pay proper attention on the parts where I'm cutting out. Okay, so the next I'm cutting out the armhole. Okay, and the next is the dart area. So you see the part I cut out, and I believe that is very clear to you all as well. So all I'm going to do now is that I'm going to bring my side front and my center front together. I'll close the darts. Okay, so you can see what I've done right here. So I'm going to bring it together this way and make sure that the darts are entirely closed, because I'm trying to get that curve in front of the neckline of this our gown. Okay, so mine wasn't really coming together. I had to use my sellotape again to bring them together so that they can lap on top of each other. So make sure that your darts are properly closed before you go ahead to do this. Then on the center front, I'm just going to come down by 1.5 inches on the neck depth right there. Okay, I believe you see what I've done so far. Then I'm going to place this my curve rule this way, and I'll connect it slightly from my armhole, not like immediately from the armhole there into this 1 inch. Then I'll go ahead and cut this out. So right now we've gotten that curve that is on around the neckline area of the gown. So I'm just going to remove this sellotape I used in taping these two side front and the center front together. I'll remove the sellotape because they're meant to be two separate pieces. They're not meant to be together as one. Okay, so I only tape them together just for me to get this curve, because they were not lapping very well. All right, so after all the trimming, I'm just going to keep these two pieces aside so that I can cut out for the shoulder part of our gown. So just exactly the way I drafted, I'm just going ahead to cut this out, as you can see right here. So after cutting out everything, this is what I have for the front part of this gown, as you can see right here. So this is how nice it's looking, and for the Basque area, you can see how beautiful it's looking as well. So I'm just going to keep the front part of this my gown aside so that I can work on the back part. So for the back part, I'm just going to start marking half of an inch from the center of my paper. I'll connect that point into a straight line, and that will be my zipper allowance. I'll also take note of my shoulder allowance right there. So at this point, I'm just recreating everything I did for the front part of this dress. My shoulder is the same, 7.5 inches. My armhole is 8.8 inches, sorry. My bust point, everything is just the same. The only difference with the front and the back right here will be on the way we take our darts together with the zipper allowance. Okay, so this is just everything I did for the front part. I'm also doing for the back part, but the parts that will be different, I'll have to slow this down, so we'll do it together. Okay, so on the half length at both legs of my dart, I'm just going to come out by half of an inch. Then I'll connect it this way to my chest line and also to my hip line. So the length of this my paper is also 24 inches, which is also for my hip length. Okay, so I'm just going ahead now to replace my dart I have on the half length. Half of an inch at both sides is 1 inch, and I'm going ahead to also replace it as well. And I'm also using my curve rule to also reconnect this other side of my dart. So you can see what I have here so far, and I'm just going to move to the neckline as well. I'll mark a neck width of 3 inches. From the armhole, I'll mark 3 inches as well inside. Then I'm going to connect these 2 points together this way. Please also note that the neck depth is the same thing. The neck depth right here is 6 inches, and I also created my shoulder slants, as you can see right here. So because I still have extra space at the size of my paper, I went ahead to mark a stitching allowance of 1 inch alone, and now connect it with my free hand together. So this is all I have, and I'm also going to slash this from the half length, okay, so that I can separate this piece to close my dart as well. So I'll go ahead and close this my dart and also sellotape it. So I'll also get the middle of this my basque area. So remember that I'm not extending this into my allowance of my stitching allowance of 1 inch. I just stopped exactly on the actual length of, and I'm also marking it from my zipper allowance, not actually from the ends of this my paper. So the same pattern I use in creating my bags for the front part of this my dress is the same pattern for the back part. Please, there is no difference at all. All right, so this is also how I'll go ahead to replace this, and I've also created this my curve using my curve rule as well, and then go ahead and cut this out exactly the same way I'm doing right here. So this is it after cutting out. On the zipper part, I'm going to mark half of an inch below from the top part and slant it into the sides this way. This is me trying to eliminate any sort of bulge that might appear later on at the back of my gown. So I'm done with the backs. I'll just get the top parts, and I'm also going to go ahead now to cut out the yoke parts. You can see I slashed it, and also cut out the sides as well. So for this particular back piece, it's going to be one piece. I'm not going to separate them on the dart area. Okay, so I'm just going to cut out the sides and the armhole, and now the shoulder, and that is all, as you can see right here. So when I also get to the zipper part, I'm going to go up from the base by half of an inch and slant it towards the sides of this my paper. Now just cut this out. So this is me also getting rid of any sort of bulge. I'm going to assemble all the back piece together, so you see what we have. So it's going to align with the back part when I close my dart. Okay, so now this is what I have as well for the front again. I'll also go ahead and cut out all of this piece on my actual fabric, which is my crepe. So this is all I have. You can see that I've cut out all my pieces on my fabric, and this is what it looks like. This is both for the back part and the front part of my gown, which I drafted earlier. So I added stitching allowance all around at the necessary parts, as you can see right here. So in the second part of this tutorial, which is going to be the sewing part, I'll be sharing with you all the detailed process on how to go about the joining or assembling of all these drafted pieces in today's tutorial. Please do stay tuned, and I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you're yet to subscribe, please kindly do so. I'll see you all in my next one. Have a lovely time ahead of you all. Bye.